We welcome you all to the first keynote session of TRBS Speaker Series. In the second ever virtual TRBS, we are extremely honored to host Mrs. Arundhati Bhattacharya for the inaugural event. Arundhati ma'am is the chairperson and CEO for India. Prior to that, she served as the chairperson of State Bank of India for 4 years. Throughout Arundhati ma'am's 40 plus years in the financial and technology sector, she has earned a string of accolades to her name, which include the world's 100 most powerful women by Forbes, globally most powerful women in business, and world's 50 greatest leaders list by Fortune. On that note, I would be handing over to our moderators for today, Shubham and Amit.
Thank you, Rohan, and ma'am, welcome to the session. It's an absolute honor to host you today.
Thank you.
Great. I think the question that's on the top of everyone's head, the switch from State Bank of India to Salesforce, a great pivot. The challenges and learning. What was the inspiration? How did you go about the entire thought process? What did you learn?
Yeah, I have been answering that question quite frequently because, people seem to find it difficult to think that anybody should reimagine their career so late in the day. Today, for instance, the current 65 is, I think, the earlier 40s. And that's the way we need to look at it. Because I think all of us will have pretty long careers and they will not be in the same field. I had some time to think about this in that 1 year's gardening leave that I was required to take after I retired as the chairman of SBI. At that point of time, I was mainly doing things like lectures and stuff like that, some investor meets. And I was lecturing at a lot of these colleges and schools and with a lot of youngsters. And they would often, be very surprised that I had spent 40 years in one organization. And I used to tell them that it may be 40 years, but, I actually had more than 12 to 14 jobs because I was in various facets of banking and each one very different from the other. So, I came back, for instance, from New York and went into the Treasury. And from the Treasury, I went into rural Uttar Pradesh. Okay.
Right.
And then from rural Uttar Pradesh, again, I came in to the corporate center and started setting up new businesses. Now, it's not many people that get, opportunities such as these, but I was very lucky in being able to get those opportunities. And therefore, for me, it was a constant learning. Now, after I retired and I was talking to these youngsters, they would often ask me that, how do you see our career? Is it going to follow the same kind of trajectory? And I told them that given the fact that, the cycles have become much shorter, you're in a world where, things are going to change much, much faster. And if that's the case, the skills that you have will sunset during your time as in your career. And you will have to learn new skills and maybe in an entirely different area. It may not have absolute adjacencies. It may be totally different. And, when I got this opportunity, the thought that went through my mind was that, I was always a customer. And here were all these vendors, who were showing me all kinds of products and all kinds of things and, sort of making me dream my dreams as to what my organization could do. And now I could be on the other side of the table, actually with a ringside seat to cutting edge technology, because Salesforce is a cloud native company, just 23 years old. And it has evolved from being just a CRM company to what we call Customer 360. So we do now not only do sales and service, but we do marketing, we do commerce, we do integration, we do analytics, we do every single thing that a customer possibly needs. So, to get a seat at the table there and see this transformation, it was more of a enticement than I could resist. And therefore, that's how I'm here. And I'm glad because, I'm dealing with a company, coming from a company that was today, I think now it is 218 years old, to a company that's 23 years old, coming from a platform that had been very well set out. The chairman of SBI, that role is a very properly, what should I say, delineated role. I didn't really have to go about, reinventing it, to coming into a position which didn't have anything at all, in the sense that I'm supposed to create this role. Okay, didn't have a country manager. So I'm required to create it. And, for most of these companies, the US-based companies that have outfits in India, India is unlike any other country. In most other countries, they only have sales and distribution. India is the only country where they also have, R&D, they have technology, they have engineering, they have support, they have, all kinds of other hubs that are supporting the global services. And therefore, it gives you a pretty large kind of kind of a backdrop on which to learn. So I think those were the main imperatives. And definitely working with a company where, the average age is 30. And I keep joking with them that with me signing, it became 31. Okay. But doing that and working with a company where the average age was upwards of 47, it's definitely very different. But surely a huge learning, opportunity.
Wow. So from an organization 200 years old to an organization 23 years old, something with well-set boundaries and delineated roles to something where you create the processes. Interesting journey, ma'am. But that's also a great segue to my next question, which is both looking at from an employee's perspective. So I know for a fact that you had very employee-friendly policies in SBI, right? Very women-centric policies as well. And then now Salesforce is probably one of the great places to work for. It's been recognized as that. So how do you really create that inclusive workspace for the people who are there? Any thoughts on that?
So, Salesforce has a lot of values and they are very intentional about it. One of the values, for instance, is equality. Okay. And when we talk about equality, there's no question of not walking the talk. And I'll give you one small experience. Mark Benioff, who's the founder, he had he was very sure that, so as I said that, in Salesforce, they're very clear about walking the talk about this value of equality. And Mark Benioff, who's the founder of Salesforce, he was very sure that, if a survey was done regarding pay parity between genders, we'd come up tops. There would be no difference and there would be pay parity. So he went ahead and told the HR people to go ahead and do the survey. And they came back and told him that, look, we can look under the hood. But if there is a difference, you'll actually have to shell out hard cash. And he said, I'm quite okay with that if it happens, but I'm sure it won't. Till date, Salesforce has spent $16.2 million in ensuring pay parity. Okay. So in the initial instance, they actually found about, they had to sort of spend about 5 million. But since then, we have acquired a number. I think, we have really tried to ensure that we walk the talk in whatever we say and do. And this is true, in respect of not only gender, but in respect of every other instance. And we have communities, for instance, we have a community called Outforce that basically addresses the issues of the LGBTQ plus community. Okay. So we have a minority force that looks at, the minorities, whether they be gender, whether they be race, creed, caste, religion, whatever. Okay. So we are extremely intentional about creating this inclusive workspace and for ensuring that everybody has the right opportunities to try and progress their careers by ensuring that, we marry a lot of technology data with the employee engagement. So the employee engagement is not purely done intuitively. There is a lot of technology that goes behind it. And we also have in the system something called a V2MOM. A V2MOM is basically values, vision, and your measures of obstacles and methods. So that's the way it goes. So you have a vision. What is your individual vision? What are the values that you really and truly want to live? And then what are the methods by which you will do it? How do you measure those methods, whether you're succeeding or not, and what are the obstacles? So this V2MOM is something that is actually applied across the board in respect of individuals, in respect of projects, in respect of process changes. And because we do it in that intentional way, it is easy to connect up with the employee to try and understand whether the employee understands where he needs to go, and then how is he doing in that particular journey of his. And this is reviewed on a daily basis, or not on a daily, but on a quarterly basis. It's a dynamic process, okay? So we've added a lot of processes, a lot of technology, and a lot of data to ensure that people, really and truly feel included within the organization and feel that there is transparency in whatever we are doing, and therefore are able to find the right kind of help that helps them progress in their careers.
Makes sense. I think I can clearly see why a lot of people would want to work for Salesforce and stay there. I hope I'm audible, right? Amit? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you are.
Yes,
Okay,
you are slightly lagging. So, ma'am, given your long career, you have gone through multiple cycles of the economic turn, as they say. Now that we are in the ebbing wave of COVID-19, how do you see the economy shaping up in the short to medium term?
So I think, the economy will pick up, and it will pick up quite sharply, mainly because there's a lot of demand that's being kept in abeyance, and you can keep demand in abeyance only so long. So, you can see that immediate pickup, but obviously the immediate pickup is not something that's going to sustain. However, I think what will happen is that people are now looking very, seriously at productivity and efficiency gains. And this is something which is now taking up their mind space, mainly because they do understand that, the VUCA world that was a topic of conferences is now no longer a topic of conferences. It's what we are living in. And if we are living in a world that is full of uncertainty, the thing that business really hates is uncertainty. So if you have uncertainty, there is very little way in which you can really think of investing and really think of growing, okay? And therefore, they realize that, in order to take out the uncertainty, what they need to do is 2 or 3 things. One is they need an omni-channel access to all stakeholders. So, they want to be able to access their customers, their dealers, their suppliers, their employees. That a channel of access has to be both physical and digital. It can't be either or, okay? The second thing that they want to do is they want to own the customers. There is, for instance, I was talking to one business where they had stores and they were selling on these major platforms. As you know, when the first lockdown happened, these major platforms, they were also closed down because there was no way of sending things across state borders, okay? And so suddenly this company lost all its customers. The platforms they were selling on, those are gone. Their own, stores are closed. So they have no customers suddenly. So now they are very clear that they must have their own platform as well and be able to be, able to own the customer so that they are never out of touch with them, okay? The third thing that they want to do is to see how the processes can be really changed into the digital world and made far more efficient and productive. So human touch is required in many places. And especially, I would say, the human touch is required when you are at the point of a decision. But how do you take along that person to that point of decision in a digital way, which makes the whole thing far more efficient? So for instance, we are talking about, in fact, we are currently doing what is called Dreamforce. And Dreamforce is our biggest tech event that happens in the year. One of the trailblazer talks over there is from one of the jewelry companies. And they have showcased how they do a video display of all of their articles so that, there is a shortlisting of what the customer really wants. And then the customer actually drops into the store and within 15 minutes, the whole thing is closed. Okay. So instead of spending 2.5 hours in the store, they can actually afford to spend much more time at their leisure, at the time they want, totally on the digital channel, okay, on the digital platform. So, sort of putting things together in order to create these efficiencies is what, customers are looking for. And this is, I think, the way forward, because what we have to do in an uncertain world is to make very, very sure that our efficiencies and productivities don't get impacted. Just think about, for instance, a dealer that sends out certain things to their dealerships. Okay. Now, if they have the COVID map of India, which is available publicly from the Ministry of Health, and they overlay it on the places that they are supplying to, they can immediately make out which are the places where the shops will be opened, and therefore, they can actually sell, and which are the places where shops are closed, and they can divert their supplies accordingly. They can rationalize their productions accordingly. So, there are ways and means of doing this by bringing several data points together, which, earlier we never used to think about because it was not necessary. But today it is. Today it is the pandemic. Tomorrow, how do we know we have a climate event? The other day, next day, it might be something that I've not thought of at all. And I often joke about this, that in my earlier institution, we used to have a very thick, ICAP document, which used to document all the possible scenarios. Okay. And if I remember, we used to go through this, every 6 months, I think we used to go through every scenario and then check our preparedness for those scenarios. So if I remember, we had about 62 scenarios. Okay. The pandemic is the 63rd. All right. And the problem is, it's not as though people hadn't been talking that, it's 100 years over since the Spanish flu and a pandemic is around the corner. People have been saying that. We just didn't take notice. We didn't believe it could happen, right? So that is the problem with, whatever risk assurances and management we do. At the end of the day, there is that uncertainty. And the only way that you can take care of that uncertainty is to be very resilient. And to be very resilient, you have to be very productive, very efficient. You have to own your customer. You have to have that access to all your stakeholders. These are absolutely the basic building blocks. And that's where business is going. And because of that, I think, business will pick up and there will be a lot to do.
Interesting insights. So in the face of an uncertain future, technology will be the enabler of a bright one.
Absolutely.
Okay, so continuing the theme of economy, what are the sectors that you see going forward will perform well versus the sectors which will lag? And how do you see the implication of technology, the enablement using the new technologies that is going to happen in those sectors? How do you see all of these coming together to create that bright future that you spoke about?
So, the thing is, there are, in every sector, there are digitally aware people and there are digital laggards. Okay. So the laggards will really need to pick up pace. They need to pick up pace and they need to become, some of the leaders instead of the laggards. And for instance, the places where we have seen technology really being adopted are stuff like EdTech, and you are from an institution which is a brick and mortar learning center. How quickly will you be able to pivot into also being part of the EdTech scenario? That is very important, because if you look at the EdTechs, they're going places. They're going places because they already were on that model. Okay. So, things like high tech, things like professional services, things like, pharma, the life sciences, all of these, they have been sort of pivoting. And of course, the fin sector, they have by far been some of the people who have done the technology adoption the best, and therefore they are at the vanguard of it. They're at the forefront of it. And you see the amount of, innovation that is coming in over there. But it's not to say that other industries are not innovating. You look at logistics, the way they are evolving day by day, it's quite miraculous. And again, they have to evolve, because if you look at the amount of online purchases that are happening, it's all dependent upon the logistics, on how quickly can you deliver. Because today, that today's generation is a very impatient generation. If they order something today, they want it tomorrow. They don't want it 7 days later. And they may be ordering it at 2 in the morning for all you know. You know, that's the kind of, independence they want, that they should be able to order at any point of time. They should be able to get delivery exactly when they want. You know, the other day I was just looking at one of these platforms, the food delivery platforms, and they were saying that, if there are essentials to be delivered, we'll do it in 15 minutes time. Imagine getting something in 15 minutes. Normally, what would we do if we ran out of some spices or condiments or something or the other in the kitchen? I would walk over to the flat in front and borrow something. I've done that a number of times because, again, in all my work and everything, I often forget to buy stuff. So, you've run out of sugar, you've run out of turmeric. I've often walked over to a neighbor and borrowed it. Now it's no longer required. You just, order it and it'll be with you in half an hour. Okay. So basically, we have to understand that all of those industries that are looking at the pain points of the customers and trying and addressing them, they are the industries that are going to do well. Industries that refuse to look at the customer and refuse to put the customer at the center, they will remain laggards. And often, this happens, and sometimes I feel a little worried about it. For instance, in the public sector specifically, I will say that adoption of, say, things like cloud technology is not as fast as it is in the private sector, because there are a lot of concerns. Now, the fact of the matter is the concerns are real, but they were real at that extent about 10 years back. Since then, though the concerns remain, things have changed. And so they need to look at the changed situation and thereafter take those decisions and do that adoption much, much faster. Otherwise, they will again get disintermediated. That's bound to happen. So, today the name of the game is to be agile and nimble. We have to be that.
So, ma'am, you made a very interesting observation. So what are some of those myths about cloud computing which continue to exist in today's time?
Well, the first and foremost is that the cloud is not secure. Okay. Now, frankly speaking, you may have all of your data on-prem and put a big lock on the door or a number lock, whatever you have. Physical security, you may be able to actually, do something about. What about logical security? You can't really ensure that 100% because the cyber fraudsters are always trying to be a step ahead of you. I remember in my earlier institution also, we had a security operations center 24/7/365, where we are, actually keeping an eye on all of our systems throughout the day or night. It used to look, like one of those NASA rooms, with lots of screens, and you sit over there. It's quite impressive. But the fact of the matter is that the cloud service providers, they are doing this for the whole world. And wherever there is an emerging threat, they are ensuring that, your data is kept safe by putting in the right kinds of measures. So to that extent, to say that the cloud is insecure, frankly speaking, doesn't make sense anymore. However, what the cloud does allow you to do are 2 or 3 things. First and foremost is, the elasticity of demand is something that the cloud is far better positioned to take on. So, if suddenly you have these peak days, okay, Diwali sales, that's a peak day. Dhanteras, that's a peak day. Now, if you're having on-prem systems, you have to provision for peak day. Now, that won't be used for, say, 360 days a year. It'll be used for 5 days a year. So there is a capital outlay that you are doing, okay? Because you not only have to have systems on-prem, you also have to have the business continuity center, near center. You have to have a far center. You have to do all of that. And that takes up a lot of capital. In the cloud, however, if you ask your cloud provider, they'll provision you within, minutes. So the elasticity of demand can be well taken care of, and you pay as per your use. You don't have to pay for it through the year, right? The fact of the matter is, these are things that people now need to take into consideration. Similarly, for instance, we are now beginning to depend so much on AI and ML. And you know that artificial intelligence, the bigger the data set it gets, the better are the results that it gives. Better are its conclusions. Now, you know, handling very large data sets on on-prem systems is very tough because, again, you know, you have to have that space. It is much easier on the cloud because of the same thing. They have the elasticity to go up and down. Not only that, you know, what happens is any changes that you want to do, the agility and the nimbleness that a cloud can provide for you, you will not have that on on-prem systems. To provision on-prem systems takes a lot of time. To provision for, you know, for the same thing, for that storage space on the cloud takes much storage or computing space, takes much smaller time. So, you know, that is one of the, I think, major things that we need to understand. The second thing is, you know, people also think that the cloud is very expensive. Again, it's not true. At one point of time, it was true, but this is not true anymore. So people are stuck in certain perceptions, which are maybe 10, 12 years old. They need to now look at the reality and actually understand that how do you discover whether something is expensive or not. If you're providing for it on-prem, you have to not only think about the costs, you have to think about the running costs. You have to think about the costs of continuously monitoring. So all of those costs you add on, and you are actually now collaborating with somebody else who's an expert in this and whose actual business depends upon keeping that safe for you. Okay. So some of your responsibilities, at least you're sharing. I'm not saying you can give it over entirely. You need to keep monitoring that, but you are sharing, and you are sharing with some of the people who, you know, who are in this business and therefore specialists. So, you know, this thought again, there are also, you know, a lot of small companies. Listen, no, cloud computing is for the big ones. Absolutely wrong. For small companies, this is even better because small companies don't have capital to spare. Why do you want to make your business capital heavy when you don't need to? That capital can be used for other resources, for human resources, which are far more required, for skill sets, for developing those skill sets. So, you know, I think, you know, these misconceptions about the cloud, they need to go. They need to go. People need to really understand what they are talking about and what they are doing. I'm not saying that, you know, we can give anybody any assurance that there will be absolutely no breach whatsoever. No one can give that assurance, whether it is on-prem or outside. And in fact, you know, there was a survey, I can't remember from where I had read it, which said that actually speaking in data leakages, it's been found that 74% of the time, it's internal folks who are actually responsible. Okay, so whether it's on-prem or cloud doesn't matter. You have to constantly also look at the people inside. So, you know, all of these must be taken in entirety, and only then you will be able to migrate to these systems which allow you the flexibility, the agility, the elasticity to actually, you know, be in step with the times.
So the world has moved on, and the organization need to move on with the world.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you so much. Actually, as I was listening to you speak about those aspects, it was almost a flashback of my past 7-8 years of cloud computing experience. Because I've seen my cloud bill come down. I've seen the security processes go up. I know how to create a virtual private network now, but it wasn't there earlier. So it was almost a flashback, but thank you so much, ma'am. I think I know you're short on time, but we'll very quickly just take a couple of questions from the audience if anyone has something. Guys, feel free to raise your hand and we'll just take a couple of questions, not more than that. I can see 2 raised hands. Omkar, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you, Arundhati, for addressing the issue on cloud as well. Like Shubham, even I come from that specific background, and I have helped set up a couple of infrastructure that way as well. So that's really a flashback and kind of the concerns which you really addressed here. And probably speaking on the same line, how do you see the fintech space now evolving? Like, given that there's a backdrop of data security and privacy concerns which have come up, you broadly touched upon it, but how do you see them shaping up with help of Salesforce or cloud in general?
See, at the end of the day, one must understand, you know, that if the data is mine, I should have first dibs on it, not some large corporate. Okay, that's fair. And that's how it should be. So, with all of these concerns coming up, there have to be ways in which people can address this. Now, if you look at the account aggregator platform, I don't know whether you are familiar with it, but the account aggregator platform is basically an NBFC that sort of sits in the middle. On the one side, you have all of the lenders. On the other side, you have all of the borrowers. And the lender, it's not only the lenders, but it's the entire financial sector, meaning the account aggregators have access to the accounts from your bank, from your broker, from your demat account, from your, any other financial holdings, the insurance companies. So what you can do as an individual is that if you're going to do some kind of business with, say, a lender, you can then authorize this account aggregator to collect your data and give it as a one-time measure to the bank or to the NBFC or to the fintech. And they are under obligation to use it only for that purpose and for nothing else. Okay, data will change on a daily basis. Your status will change on a daily basis. As long as you're not allowing complete access to all of these people, you're still able to maintain that privacy. You are allowing, and the same thing can happen, for instance, for medical data. Okay, so the thing is, the world is evolving towards empowering the individual. And the fintechs that understand this and change their models accordingly will benefit. But the solutions are all there. It's not as though the solutions are missing. The solutions are 100% available today, especially in India. I don't know whether we have a platform like the account aggregators anywhere else in the globe, but I'm very proud of the fact that India has created this. So, it can be used for medical data, it can be used for land records, it can be used for all of your other, digital what should I say, certifications and things like that. So all of your data, if for instance, you've done your MBA, you've done a number of certifications, all of it, can possibly be in the cloud, in a DigiLocker, and the account aggregator can access all of that and provide it to maybe a future employer or somewhere that you want it to be given in order to prove your credentials. So the concepts, I think. Sorry. Okay, so the thing is, all of that can be done. That's not an issue at all. And I would say that the current fintechs, they are aware of this, and they are definitely trying and evolving these so as to ensure that they are within the law and still able to function in as agile a manner as the customers expect them to.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for that. Bhavna, I see your hand up. Go right ahead.
Hi, good afternoon, ma'am. It's an honor listening to you, ma'am. Seriously, I mean, really, really thanks for your time to give us. Ma'am, I love the fact that you said that these uncertainties and the pandemic was the 63rd event, that you all have accounted for. So in light of that, I want to know what kind of qualities are required to navigate such uncertainties and black swan events like COVID and other pandemics, and what kind of leaders are required for tomorrow, specifically in the coming decade? Any good specific examples you could think of?
See, if you're in business specifically, I will say, in business, liquidity is the key. Okay, you don't have liquidity, you don't have a business. So to that extent, we have to be very careful about the risks that we are running. So if you look at a bank, earlier, if you used to tell them what's the topmost risk, they would say it's credit risk. Today, operations risks, liquidity risks, reputation risks take the space alongside of credit risk. Okay, so the fact of the matter is you have to change with the times. And as I said earlier, what is going to allow you to do that is your resilience, your ability to bounce back. There will be setbacks. Believe me, there will be setbacks. And specifically, for people like the ones coming out of IIM, where there is a lot of entrepreneurial talent. Let me tell you, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, be assured that if something can go wrong, it'll go wrong. That's a law of nature. You can't get past that. But you have to have the resilience to be able to, shake it off and stand up again and do what you need to do. Right? So to that extent, resilience is very important. And resilience comes from the fact that you are willing to change, that you have the ability to understand, how things are going to evolve. And for doing that, again, one of the very big things that I would suggest people try and sort of nurture is trying and coming to a conclusion with the minimal amount of data points. So try to see the big picture. If it reveals itself completely, easy to see. But if you have only a few data points, how do you still get that big picture? The one who gets the big picture from a very few data points is able to actually, ensure that they are taking care of the future, be prepared for the future. Unless and until you're able to do that constantly, able to envision, able to have that vision, you are going to be a follower. Okay. So to be one of those people, who are forward thinking, you need to constantly scan the environment to find what are the data points, where is it changing, how are things happening, so that is something that you all will need to do. But I think, if you're looking for what are the features, what are the things that you should cultivate, surely resilience, surely the ability to envision things, and the willingness to change. Don't get, locked into perceptions. Perceptions, by the way, are the most difficult to change. Very, very difficult, because it's all in the mind. So don't get locked into them. And last but not least, you need to be able to be team workers. You have a team, you don't have to do everything. Give the credit to your team, and your team is going to come through with flying colors. Ultimately, you'll get the credit. Okay, that will happen. But actually, it's your team that's performed. And there's no harm in giving them all the credit. Because what you're doing actually is, you are allowing many more people to look at a problem than only one person. And for your team, what I have always done, and what has always stood me in very good stead, is actually get people who are far better than me in those particular areas, because they strengthen me. Be comfortable in your skin. Don't feel threatened because somebody who's come into your team is better than to yourself, to pick up people around you who are stronger and better and understand things. And then you shouldn't be having a problem.
Very, very well said, ma'am. Thank you so much. I think this whole aspect of taking a step back, looking at the bigger picture, and being able to work with small data, and everyone is talking about big data. I think that's my key learning from this. Thank you so much, ma'am. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I think I'll close the session here. Rohan, over to you.
So, ma'am, on behalf of the TRBS team, I would like to thank you for taking out the time to enlighten us with all your experience and the knowledge that you have gathered in the past 40 plus years. As students who are aspiring to be business leaders, this session, the learnings from this session would actually help me and my teammates a lot in handling the uncertainties that we are going to face in the future in our career. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank TRBS's title sponsor SBI, associate sponsor GRT Jewelers, our business partner Perfetti Van Mel, and our knowledge partner Insight.